One senator stood motionless, calm, silent as the room came apart around him. What came next wasn't politics alone. It was a fight for the soul of something bigger. If you've ever wondered whether truth can still cut through the noise, this one's for you. Press play to dive in. He stood alone under the Capitol dome, not as a politician or a warrior, but as a reminder of what we fight for, of what we forget. The clash that ensued wasn't about parades or power. It was about something more. Who gets to define patriotism, and who dares to protect it? Have we let too much noise drown out what really matters? In an era where oneness seems a luxury and faith appears tenuous, can a single moment, one voice, still move the heart of a nation? It's the tale of a hearing that no one anticipated, and a truth too great to suppress. The entire nation experienced a momentary shock. In the midst of a dramatic Senate hearing, Senator John Nye Kennedy stunned the room by producing evidence nobody anticipated. A leaked email, boring on the surface, proved to be the one missing link that tore to shreds a well-laid political strategy. Representative Adam Schiff, formerly the epitome of unflappable confidence, now trembled under a maelstrom of criticism and the piercing eye of the public. In an instant, the chessboard was turned upside down, and Schiff found himself at the epicenter of a political earthquake. Before we get into it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new story. The Senate Armed Services Committee chamber was quiet and somber. Harsh light from tall windows caught the shine off a long, highly polished ebony table, imparting both seriousness and tension to the room. Eyes snapped to attention the moment Chairman Jack Reed brought down his gavel and opened the session. Adam Schiff stood, wearing the tranquil expression of an experienced prosecutor. His suit was impeccable, but his hands shook as he placed a thick pile of papers on the podium. He looked around the room as if willing everyone to lean forward. "Dear colleagues," he began, voice low and precise, "we're here to confront a troubling truth. President Trump has turned the Army's 250th anniversary parade into a personal showcase. It's not a salute to our troops. It's a $45 million campaign stunt." A few Democratic senators, especially Richard Blumenthal behind him, nodded in agreement. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some whispered updates to their editors. Schiff raised the pages with the highlighted marks. "I have proof," he declared, his voice rising. The White House intervened, directing the planners of the parade to insert the president's name into the official speech, making a military tribute pure propaganda. An MSNBC camera zeroed in on him, but Senator Kennedy remained absolutely still across the room, hands folded, an icy stare paired with a slight, knowing smile. Schiff continued, voice rising. "And don't forget, this parade occurs as Israel and Iran on the verge of war. Rather than pursuing nuanced diplomacy, President Trump distracts the nation with marching bands and flybys. That's irresponsible." He swept an arm toward the audience. "And let's talk home front. Rather than solve the border crisis through policy, he threatens to unleash the military on American soil, as we've seen during ICE raids in Los Angeles and Chicago." A few in the gallery clapped, mostly Trump critics, but many waited to hear what the Republicans would say next. Senator Blumenthal stood up, adding in a steady tone, "Senator Schiff is right." The sticker shock alone, $45 million, seemed difficult to swallow, particularly when there were actual national security fires to quell. Senator John Fetterman sat quietly in one corner, darting quick looks at Senator Kennedy, as though calculating his next step. Schiff's silence made him pause for a half beat, but Schiff plunged ahead. Schiff's tone became serious. "I'm requesting this committee to drill down into these documents," he said, hand on his chest. "Did the president politicize a gesture toward our troops into a vanity exercise? If we wave this off, we're blessing a commander-in-chief who uses the military as a personal billboard." His gaze glanced over toward the TV cameras, just making sure they heard every word. The air thickened. Some of the Democrats nodded, and the Republicans, with Kennedy at their helm, sat serene. Senator Lindsey Graham hunched forward, muttered something, and Kennedy nodded barely. In the press box, a reporter with Ground News wrote frantically, recording the risk Schiff was taking. If his proof didn't score, he was weakening his own hand. Schiff broadened the focus. Let's not forget the Middle East, he said. While Iran and Israel creep to the brink, the president's busy planning parades. He even tweeted that the U.S. has nothing to do with Iran's attacks. Can anyone believe that when Tehran is this close to nuclear weapons? He held Kennedy's gaze, seeming to dare him to interrupt. Then he moved to immigration. Mayors Karen Bass and Brandon Johnson are warning, ICE raids are causing fear and devastating local economies. The president says he's keeping us safe, but he's actually driving Americans apart. When Schiff finally took a seat, the room hummed. A few obligatory claps, but nothing else. In the back, a Trump supporter grumbled, Schiff's laying it on too thick again. An MSNBC journalist drummed out a headline for abuse of power, while the ground news journalist scribbled a note, big claims, thin specifics. Schiff attempted to appear serene, but his fingers curled around the lip of his notes. Chairman Jack Reed's gavel cut through the murmur. Every head was turned when Senator John Nye Kennedy stood, tall and narrow, his shadow extending across the shiny table. Ladies and gentlemen, he started, his southern accent rolling out like a slow drum beat. Senator Kennedy leaned into his slow, southern drawl, stretching each word like taffy. I've heard some tall tales in my day, he said, charm dripping from every syllable. But my colleague from California just spun the tallest of them all. The room chuckled, especially on the Republican side where Lindsey Graham nodded along. Even folks in the back, normally poker-faced, let a smile sneak out. Kennedy held up one sheet of paper and waved it as if it were a prize from a county fair. This, he asserted, is one of the pieces of evidence Senator Schiff says demonstrates presidential interference. But friends, this piece of paper, thinner than a spider web in a hurricane. He paused for dramatic effect. No signature, no letterhead, no identifiable source. If this is all California's got, it's time to go back to the drawing board. Laughter spread through the chamber. Schiff gnawed on his lip, his eyes glacial as he scribbled new notes. Kennedy's tone moderated. This parade is not about one man, he said. It's about the soldiers who froze at Valley Forge, bled at Normandy, and fought through Fallujah. He clicked a screen behind him. Up appeared social media posts, families waving flags, veterans saluting, a viral clip of a little girl handing flowers to a marching soldier. Senator Schiff describes that as a stunt, Kennedy added. I call it gratitude. The room hummed. Then, in a surprise twist, Senator John Fetterman, standing tall in suit, hoodie visible at the collar, rose to speak. Mr. Chairman, he growled, I don't always agree with Senator Kennedy, but on this he's correct. The parade commemorates our troops. Politics shouldn't split us on that. Silence descended. Pens scraped. Tension coiled. Fetterman's statement stung like a flashbang, surprising his own party. Senator Blumenthal shifted uncomfortably. Schiff froze. Pen suspended midair. Kennedy took advantage of the moment. I admire a man who speaks his mind, even if his party's holding the reins, he said, producing a smile from Fetterman and a frown from Schiff. To jam the vice shut, Kennedy summoned a witness. Retired General Thomas Hargrove, 40-year Army veteran. Medals shone on Hargrove's chest as he mounted the stand. Senator, he declared in a firm baritone, the Department of Defense conceptualized this parade to pay tribute to the Army's legacy. I attended those meetings. No one from the White House instructed the president's name or agenda into it. Our concern was the soldiers, plain and simple. He described the process at length, emphasizing that uniformed officials, not politicians, were in charge. The only time President Trump's name was ever mentioned, Hargrove continued, was when troops, General Hargrove chuckled as he concluded, the troops only spoke of the president when they sang Happy Birthday. Absolutely spontaneous, not an order, he said, eliciting light laughter in the room. Senator Kennedy relaxed, allowing Hargrove's words to settle. And so, General, this parade was to honor the Army. Not an ego ride? He asked, adopting an air of mock surprise. Exactly, Senator. Anyone who suggests otherwise is stretching the truth, Hargrove responded. Applause erupted, loudest in the Republican ranks, but even a few neutrals were caught up. Schiff's disappointment was evident as his fingers drummed impatiently and he leaned over to whisper to an aide. Kennedy wasn't done yet. He spoke to the committee once more. His colleague wants to bring the Middle East and immigration into this like he's slinging mud expecting something to stick, he drawled. On Iran and Israel, President Trump is unequivocal. The U.S. is not behind Iran's attacks, but is prepared to protect our interests. That's leadership, not diversion. He flashed his phone showing the president's post. And on immigration, Senator Schiff whines about ICE raids while mayors like Karen Bass and Brandon Johnson harbor lawbreakers. We require border security, not emotive politics. He made the last throw. This parade was America's pride. Senator Schiff attempts to turn it into a scandal because he can't abide seeing people coming together around something greater than politics. But Americans aren't fooled. There was thunderous applause. Schiff, looking pale, leaned over toward his aide, grasping for a retort as Kennedy's piercing stare indicated he was in charge. Chairman Jack Reed rapped his gavel to cool the chamber. "We will move on to foreign policy issues," he said with a level tone. Kennedy got comfortable, eyes shining like a chess player who just pulled off a great trick. Senator Lindsey Graham followed, voice hot against his tight gray suit. "Mr. Chairman, let's get one thing straight," he thundered. "California colleague is making a parade into a reason to criticize President Trump, and now he's bringing the Middle East into it. The president is firm and clear on where he stands on Israel and Iran. That's leadership, not distraction." He held up his phone, displaying a new Trump tweet. The U.S. wasn't implicated in recent attacks, but any attack on Americans would be met with unprecedented strength. That, Graham roared, is peace through strength. He pushed on. Iran is moving towards nuclear weapons. If we don't do something, the world will suffer. I call upon the president to support Israel however possible. Weapons to complete military cooperation. Trump supporters applauded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Schiff leapt to his feet before Graham had a chance to sit. "My South Carolina colleague speaks about leadership," he said, tone-cutting. "But what we see is a president avoiding responsibility. That message is just hot air. While the Middle East simmers, he has parades staged to enhance his image. We require genuine diplomacy, not military displays." Speaking in lower tones, bordering on conspiracy, he added, "And don't forget, Trump's policies only turn up the heat on Iran." Schiff continued, voice constricted. "Remember, folks, President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and pushed Tehran into a corner. We're watching the fallout of that short-sighted move right now." His words sent a ripple of whispers through the room. An MSNBC reporter nodded furiously while typing. The ground news writer simply noted the lack of concrete details. Senator Kennedy stayed silent, giving Lindsey Graham a small nod. It was clear he'd jump in soon. But before that could happen, Senator Rand Paul stood, glasses flashing with restrained fire. "Mr. Chairman, I must speak up," Paul started, his voice low but resolute. "Indeed, Iran is perilous, but invoking force, as my friend from South Carolina just did, is a formula for disaster. We endured Iraq and Afghanistan, long, expensive wars that drank blood and treasure." He looked at Graham. "Supporting Israel doesn't require sending our children into another war. And that $45 million parade? It might have served American interests rather than subsidizing a circus." Some heads nodded. Kennedy stood, low voice raising across the room. "Senator Paul, I appreciate your prudence, but let's keep the big picture in mind." He scanned the room. "The president's not beating war drums. He's seeking diplomacy. His message is clear. The U.S. stands willing to broker a resolution to the Israel-Iran conflict. That's how a leader maintains peace, strong, not reckless." Addressing Schiff, he continued, voice hardening, "And my California colleague accuses the president of destabilizing the area. But who's actually fueling the fire? Those addicted to trying to discredit him rather than advancing actual solutions." To add force to his argument, Kennedy phoned Colonel Michael Carter, a retired Pentagon strategist. Carter, impeccably dressed in civilian attire, emerged. "Senator," he stated firmly and clearly, "the White House quietly urged behind-the-scenes negotiations between Israel and other key players to deheat tensions. The president's public message was a threat, no force employed." He showed a simple graph. Since those negotiations started, Regional assaults had decreased. The audience murmured, some in wonder at the fresh perspective. Schiff sensed control slipping. Those statistics don't tell the complete picture, he retorted, his voice ascending. Trump's so-called diplomacy, complete with parades and bluster, just adds fuel to the flames. Kennedy held up a hand, halting him. You're clouding the issues. The parade celebrated the army. It didn't initiate a war. And in the Middle East, the president is doing what you won't, standing up for allies and American interests. Schiff's eyes, sharp yet tense, scanned the dais for support. Chairman Reid rapped the gavel. We'll shift to immigration, since Senator Schiff brought it up. Kennedy nodded slightly toward Graham. An unspoken strategy unfolding. Across the aisle, Senator Fetterman sat quiet, hoodie still peeking from his suit, looking thoughtful. Schiff jumped up once more, voice like a cross-examiner. Colleagues, President Trump didn't merely deploy a parade to polish his reputation. He's using the military to bully Americans. ICE raids in Los Angeles and Chicago, supported by him, instill fear and constrict local economies. He held up a letter from LA Mayor Karen Bass and started reading. Mayor Bass writes. The chamber came to a standstill. Kennedy's words rang out like a drumbeat in the quiet. All the senators, staffers, and reporters had their eyes fixed on the screen as the enormous email projection came into view. The subject line was, Re-Parade Narrative, Urgent Coordination. The email body, highlighted for emphasis, indicated that the MSNBC editor had written, Need to advance the Trump abuse of power narrative. Have commentators prepared for after the event. Johnson's staff confirms talking points to be coordinated. Gas traveled down the room. Schiff went pale, an odd color, half ash, half crimson. He leaned forward toward his aide, speaking in a tense whisper. But there was no saving the optics now. Kennedy's tone came back, measured and as keen as a knife. Now I'm just a simple Louisianan, he said, eliciting a few tentative laughs. But even I can smell political collusion when it's served on a silver platter. This wasn't oversight. This was orchestration. The story was written before the facts were even in. He whacked the folder again for emphasis. And there's more where that came from. Chairman Reid sat stiffly, tension now so dense it could be cut. Schiff jumped to his feet, spilling his water glass, his voice breaking as he attempted to interrupt. This is a smear, an invasion of staff privacy. This is misinformation. His finger shook as he gestured in the direction of the screen. You have no right to root around confidential correspondence. Kennedy's eyebrow rose, unruffled as a still pond. Then maybe my colleague can tell us how his classified communications just so happened to duplicate MSNBC's word-for-word coverage. He paused, then injected in a smile that was an inch wide. Transparency's a two-way street, Senator. Lindsey Graham couldn't help adding to the pile-on. Rising from his seat, he proclaimed, I move that the committee subpoena the entire email exchange between Senator Schiff's office and MSNBC. If there is nothing to hide, there is nothing to fear. Republican roars of approval rang out. Even some moderate Democrats looked around at one another nervously. Fetterman sat stoically with arms crossed, eyes cast down. No longer the wild card of volatile unpredictability, but undeniably distancing himself. Schiff was clearly coming apart now. This is a partisan ambush, he yelled, voice squeaky and strident. Kennedy advanced, folder still clutched in his hand. No, Senator, this is accountability. Chairman Reid, visibly shaken but fighting to stay impartial, again raised his gavel. Order. The committee will now take a brief recess before we go on with the motion to subpoena communications. He waited a moment, then concluded with a deep sigh. This issue will be resolved in full. Shuffling senators, buzzing aides, and sprinting reporters went out to pen breaking headlines as Kennedy smiled contentedly. He leaned over to Graham and whispered, Checkmate's a move away. Graham, you defended our tremendous military and showed the lies. The American people know the truth. The Post set Truth Social ablaze, rapidly going viral. Conservative and centrist news outlets published with these headlines. Schiff cornered, emails reveal media coordination. Kennedy's mic drop moment takes over Senate hearing. Fetterman breaks ranks, criticizes Schiff over parade politicization. In the meantime, MSNBC entered into damage control. The network issued a brief statement. We absolutely deny any coordination with political administrations and will unilaterally look into the claimed emails in question. Back in the Senate halls, Chairman Jack Reed came back from recess with a more serious demeanor than before. This hearing has brought serious concerns regarding political influence, media behavior, and this committee's integrity, he averred, his tone measured and serious. I myself will personally review the papers that were filed and make sure action is taken as it should be. Kennedy nodded respectfully but leaned toward Graham, whispering, he knows this isn't over. Reporters swarmed Emily Chen as she exited the hearing room, with many wanting the raw data she testified to. Her soft testimony had dropped like a thunderclap, clear, unbiased, and unshakable. Outside, Schiff was nowhere to be found. His office subsequently put out a brief statement accusing misinformation and partisan theatrics, and promising to keep fighting for democracy. But behind the scenes, people were already whispering Schiff's credibility had been severely dented. By night, news analysis on all platforms couldn't help but notice. Senator Kennedy had executed what many were labeling a historic takedown. Fetterman's surprise turnabout and Emily Chen's fact-based testimony took center stage. Kennedy, on the other hand, went back to his office where a small cluster of aides were waiting. He sat down, unknotted his tie, and took a deep breath. We didn't win just a hearing, he said softly. We reminded people what truth sounds like. The fight was not won, but the day was Kennedy's. The online accolades came quickly. Senator Fetterman's plumbed-on-tation. The parade was to honor our great army. Struck Truth Social like a firework, garnering millions of likes. Comments piled up. Schiff got crushed. A ground news summary was soon following. Kennedy and Fetterman humiliate Schiff. Parade seen as Trump's win. Even MSNBC, reluctantly, began writing a segment that begrudgingly admitted the public adored the parade. As patrons poured out of the hearing room, one visitor grumbled loud enough for all to hear. He chose the wrong fight, and heads nodded in affirmation. The corridor buzzed with electricity. Staff and visitors thumb-scrolled through an infinite stream of hot takes on Kennedy versus Schiff. Schiff, lost in thought, slipped down side halls, avoiding the whirl of cameras. Kennedy, on the other hand, took a moment. He extended his hand to shake with veterans, smiling like a newly crowned prizefighter. Laughter and chortled one-liners abounded, most of them skewing heavily in Kennedy's direction. The hallway was electric. Staffers and visitors thumb-surfed an endless stream of hot takes on Kennedy versus Schiff. Schiff, introspective, slipped off side corridors, avoiding the torrent of cameras. Kennedy, by contrast, paused to shake veterans' hands, grinning like a prizefighter who'd just claimed the belt. Giggle and hushed one-liners filled the air, all of them leaning overwhelmingly towards Kennedy. Ground News, steadfast to its neutral label, published a detailed summary. Kennedy dominates hearing. Schiff's attempt at smearing parade falls short. Their figures reported 60% of right-leaning media cheering Kennedy, whereas left-leaning networks, MSNBC included, grumbled barely a reluctant headline. Controversy breaks out over military parade hearing. One MSNBC analyst, stern-faced, had to admit on air, public support for the parade is undeniable. Another black mark against Schiff, who had counted on media support. Little protest, large shrug. A few No Kings protesters clumped outside bearing signs that said, Trump is no king, but they were swamped by spectators who were taking pictures of the parade on their cell phones. One of them carried a worn Trump toy in an effort to get noticed. The majority of passers-by simply maintained their pace. A spicy repost ridiculed. Wrong fight, folks. The parade's about the army, not Trump. The joke traveled at lightning speed compared to the protest chants ever could. From his mobile, Senator Fetterman dropped a new post. The parade honored soldiers. Period. Let's fix the laws instead of sniping. Both sides showed support. A centrist user complimented, Fetterman's a rare Democrat who speaks truth. Anonymous left-wing voices complained and called him a traitor. Nevertheless, his position continued to drive home the message. Honor troops over party loyalty. Never behind schedule, President Trump fired off on Truth Social. Thank you, Senators Kennedy and Fetterman, for standing up for our great army. The parade is America's pride. Millions engaged within hours. One pointed remark captured the essence. Schiff attempted to bring down Trump, embarrassed himself only. While the dome of the Capitol glowed orange with the late-day sun, social media was still on fire. Kennedy left the building, tie a little awry, grin broad. Supporters cheered and took photos. One shouted, "Kennedy's awesome." Schiff exited a side door, bypassing the media spotlight. The day was not political theater alone. It was a lesson on how Americans balance patriotism and division. The Army's 250th anniversary parade was an iconic unifying figure. Veteran stories from World War II to Afghanistan overwhelmed timelines, and it became clear the event was theirs, not some politicians. A poignant Gold Star mom post said it all. "This parade reminds me my son didn't die in vain. Thank you, President Trump and Senator Kennedy, for keeping patriotism alive." Millions liked and shared. Tangible evidence Schiff's bid to label the parade a scandal had failed. Ultimately, Kennedy, surprisingly aided by Fetterman, demonstrated that true patriotism can transcend party lines. A neutral user's post said it best. Schiff wanted to take a part, but Kennedy and Fetterman reminded us, the Army belongs to all Americans. And that ultimately was Schiff's biggest loss. Not in the leaked email, not in the stuttering arguments, but in not seeing the moment. Folks didn't want more division. They needed a reason to stand together. As Senator Kennedy climbed into his waiting vehicle, he hesitated, looking back over his shoulder at the Capitol one last time. His calm, reflective eyes showed a man who realized that the message of the day had reached deeper than politics. An aide slipped forward and asked, "Senator, what was the most significant thing today?" Kennedy smiled, his voice low and even. "We reminded people America is larger than one individual. That's worth fighting for." Those words, plain, unadorned, resonated like a closing note in a symphony of the nation. Final reflection. This hearing, focusing on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, became bigger than an argument of personalities. It became a reflection, displaying the profound divisions of American politics and media. Yet it also illustrated how honesty, integrity, and solidarity are able to pierce the din. Senator Kennedy stood for transparency. Senator Fetterman stood for integrity. And they both reminded us, patriotism isn't politics. Schiff's effort to politicize a celebration of the military fell apart not only because of facts, but because it did what politicians often do: underestimate what matters most to people: sacrifice, unity, respect. The viral email, the mother's heartfelt Facebook post, the salute by the veteran. They weren't just moments, they were reminders that the truth still exists. What can we learn? Don't be blinded by political tribalism from what truly counts. Question media narratives. Confirm before you demonize. Seek common ground in narratives that bring people together, not tear them apart. As the folks at Ground News demonstrated, there is always a means to get past the spin and find out what's true. So whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or somewhere in the middle, this tale reminds us that it should always be more important to honor our soldiers, protect our nation's principles, and tell the truth, no matter how difficult, than party loyalty. Thanks for keeping up with this tale of quiet patriotism's victory. Consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss our next breakdown, where we continue to reveal the truth behind America's most formative moments. Until then, remember, truth matters, unity matters, and America above all matters.